Welcome to another Army Showcase. My name is Nicholas, and I'm here with Jeff, Dan, and Dan. We've got two Dans in the house. They brought beautiful narrative armies, and we're going to show them off today. Welcome here, gentlemen. We're so excited to have you guys here. You flew all the way from Edmonton to get here today. We're in Vancouver, Canada, and they have brought 3 armies with them today. We're gonna be playing some narrative games shortly, maybe do a little mini narrative series. These 3 guys have been playing for a while together. Their armies have been grown and shaped by the narrative battles they have played together, and we want to show you what that could look like as we dive into this army showcase. So right over here, we have the Gene Stealer Cults by...
This is by Dan. I'm regular Dan, I guess. And this is my McCraig's Worker Alliance Gene Stealer Cult.
So I want to address the other 2 armies in the room here. We've got the Black Legion from...
I'm locally known as Chaos Dan, helps differentiate us. Yeah. And this is the Chosen of Oblivion, which is my Black Legion army.
And then lastly, over there, we have an Orc Horde army.
I'm Jeff. This is Gorg Bloodguts' Blitzer Brigade.
You guys said that some of the miniatures in your armies have been converted because of battles you guys have played together in your ongoing campaigns and crusades and narrative games.
For my army, it is basically any of my units that are kind of converted off of the idea of my army is now pre-ascension in our stories. So I need to hide them amongst the fellow Imperial loyalists. So I've been converting my armies to look and match this story that I'm trying to tell of my Gene Stealers working with the Imperium and why they're not suspicious. So we have 2 armed acolytes right there. We have 2 armed aberrants right there that are totally not suspicious at all.
And you mentioned that you have one guy that actually has been upgraded because of various narrative play you've done.
Yeah, Slugnob Loot Grabba started as the knob of a squad of Death Skulls boys. And over the course of the campaign, he just kept being present whenever something really important was happening. And so he's been upgraded to Gorg's top lieutenant, Slugnob Loot Grabba, and now is a war boss in the army.
Let's get into these armies. We've got GSC that have converted to be cowboys.
Yes.
You have a story behind these. Tell me the story and talk about some of these conversions here.
Their story started in the first campaign that Jeff's orcs participated in, the one where the planet was eaten by Tyranids. That was my Tyranids that ate that planet. And after finishing that story, I kind of got the that is the goal with Tyranids, is you want to eat the planet. And at that point, I wanted something different. So Gene Stealers was the move. And what I really liked with these Gene Stealers is they are the McCraig's Worker Alliance. So we have Pat Diaz here, who is my icon ward with the logo of the McCraig's Worker Alliance. And they go around the Imperium. They try to stick around the edges of the Milky Way, and they target areas of the Milky Way that have been devastated by war or tragedy and stuff like that. They're a very resourceful crew and union that can get by with very low tech, which is why we have our mounted divisions. So like the Sandlior Law Dog Mounted Division and the Espandor Surveyors Union 80th. They're all on horses.
And these are your bikes.
These are my bikes.
Your demo bikes. I love it.
And then we have Roy Smalls and the Calamitous Fifth. This is my rock grinder. That's
a rock grinder.
Yeah, that's
not
my
a
rock
runner.
grinder. Eddie Fluke and Mad Jack Crocker are my Ridge Runner.
I see so many cool narrative conversions here. This army has been lovingly converted with so many cool sculptures. I see cowboy hats. Is this because you're from Alberta?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm. My entire family is really famous in the cattle industry. We were the first Canadians to win a giant show down in the States. So cowboy is part of my heritage. And when I saw that Kellermorph model, I was watching the show Hell on Wheels, and I'm like, I want to do a cowboy army that is Gene Stealer cults that follow the light rail systems and build transportation systems in the Imperium. Now, the only sad thing is the Kellermorph was what inspired this entire army. And as you notice, I don't have a Kellermorph here that is the model that inspired the army, because I immediately got this girl right here, and that's what started the conversions of the army. That's so Severin Rain, I think was her name. Got given that model and decided to convert her into a custom Kellermorph for my army, and liked her so much more than anything else I had. So this is now Ginny Hazard, and she has been inspiring this army for a long time and helped lead to all the other conversions that we have in the army. They get by on little low tech, and they go out to these places and are like, hey, we can help build your transportation systems, get you guys back up and running. And then there's the second name and second symbol of my army, which is the Shadow's Comfort. That is the religious half of my army. And they are like, have you heard the good word of the Shadow's Comfort? And that is led by Reverend Bo Buchanan and Theodore, who are probably the fan favorite of my army because Theodore is adorable and Theodore is a gem. But Theodore, when he goes into the battle, If Reverend Bo Buchanan dies, Theodore does not. If Reverend Bo Buchanan dies, Theodore gets unhitched and leaves the battle free, safe, and
dies.
goes to a better place. And that's been this army's story, and now that they're in the Redclaw constellations, they are part of the Imperial Alliance. And that's why we've started developing all like my Groundhogs 13th, the Paradrium, Steel Drivers Union, and Mercy. So these are my Aberrants and my Abominant. These are some of my new Acolyte hybrids, and they have been all converted to blend in to the Imperium because they have 2 arms and they look kind of normal, and it's just like, ah, you've got a weird splotch on your head.
I can look past that. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, conversions are a harder part to do in armies, but one of the easier parts of the story, and I think Jeff carries this into his army too, is color choices. In my army, red is the color of law. So anyone that is involved with the law of the Union or law enforcement has the color red. The San Leor Law Dogs all have red on their models. This is Boss Dixie Gallows. She has red. We also have Valentine Valdez. He has red. And you'll see the leaders of each of my squad units has a little bit of marker of a red on them. And then the religious half has this kind of like nice deep violet color, and that carries across the army too.
I love this army, it's so great. And let's move on to another beautiful Black Legion army. Talk to me about it. What is your narrative here? Who's your heroes, and where have you done conversions?
My narrative is the Chosen of Oblivion. So in the Redclaw Isles, there was basically no Chaos forces for the first chapter?
First chapter of the campaign.
And there was no real big villain. So I took it upon myself as a big fan of Chaos to become the villain of the Redclaw Isles, which did culminate in a massive 30-person game the last go-around where they sieged the Chaos homeworld in the Eye. I have multiple cool characters, so this is a big one for me. I've been collecting Chaos for almost 20 years now, and as those people know who collect Chaos, some of the kits are kind of old. So this is the classic Terminator Lord, and I've done a lot of conversions with 3D print pieces, making my own kind of weapons and stuff like that, as well as switching out like heads from the new kit to make him the same size, because if he's off his cool tactical rock, he's a little bit shorter than everyone else. And he collects demon weapons, so all my Terminators are actually magnetized. And he has about 9 custom weapons that I've made. So depending on the story and how I want to play it, he can bring anything. Today, he brought the battle axe because I think it's pretty cool. I have some more cool characters like this Master of Execution, who is mostly AOS pieces on a Havoc body, and he collects skulls. So as he kills legends inside the narrative, I add another chain and another skull, and they actually are free floating chains and they dangle and stuff like that. And right now, I'm on the recruitment for Chaos players. So if there's Chaos players in Edmonton, let me know. Join my alliance. We can win. Chaos is my vibe. I really enjoy spikes, gold, and stuff like that. So
you enjoy spikes.
I enjoy spikes. Spikes and gold.
Spikes
and
gold.
Burning the galaxy, pretty much, is my vibe. And Chaos doesn't have a cool command squad, so I made one.
There you go.
I wanted a banner. Everybody else had banners. I wanted a banner.
Last but not least, we got some really cool orcs over there. Tell me about them. What have you converted? What's their shtick? What's their story?
They started life on a jungle planet, and then Dan's Tyranids ate it. So they had to go into space.
They escaped.
Yes, the Beastnaga portion of the army represents the kind of veterans that have been around since that time. So they are from this original jungle planet and have still sort of kept the old ways. But currently, the warlord is Gorg Bloodguts. He is a Blood Axe war boss who is taking command of the warbands. And now that they've popped out in the Redclaw constellations, he's really been butting heads with Thrug Skullcrusher, who is Dan's war boss, to take control of the orc homeworld in that area, Ixia. He's currently in charge of the orc fleet and a lot of orc manufacturing. A lot of the first campaign, I kept capturing factories and stuff, which also put me into conflict with Dan's Workers Alliance, who were running the factories. And so the Repulse Orc is, I think, my biggest and coolest conversion. It is a repulsor combined with, I think, a Skylanders toy.
There's a big rocket on the edge.
It was built in the factory by Dan's enslaved
oppressed workers.
Yeah, by the Tug 212. That Tug 212 union built that Repulse Orc for him.
Did they build in a backdoor explosion device?
That would have been smart. They are not that clever because they had to get liberated by the rest of the MWA.
The army's got a big Blood Axe contingent with a bunch of commandos, big giant squad of Blood Axe boys that hangs out with Gorg. But they've also got a Death Skulls contingent that has started to develop. I really like the idea in older editions where orcs weren't like a mono clan thing. You would expect to see all of the clans represented. So I've started working towards that, and the first after the Blood Axes were the Death Skulls. And that has become sort of the second big component of the army, because anytime something important happened, Lugnob Lootgrabba, who started as this knob and is now this war boss, he was around and contributing. In the final battle of the first campaign, Dan and I's war bosses fought one-on-one. And his won, but he made a retreat move at one point, which became a huge narrative point for my army because he was a coward. He ran away. Lugnob is the one that saw it and could be like, no, that really happened. Gorg's not lying to you.
You say coward, I say cunning yet brutal. So,
But the story of the first campaign was these three war bosses fighting over who would take control of the army now that they're in a new place.
Yeah.
And that is what solidified Gorg being able to take control, and what then upgraded Lugnob to be sort of his top lieutenant and a war boss.
Now, as you see, these guys all have very similar shirts on. They're from Redclaw Gaming, gaming and Warhammer and Nerd Store.
General nerd stuff.
They're located in Edmonton. We got the pleasure of going to see it last time we were there. It's a really cool place, lots of really good terrain, and you guys run narrative events and stuff like that. And so that's pretty much where you play most of your games, correct?
Yeah, we run 2 big narrative campaigns every year, one in the winter, one in the fall. And the fall is the Redclaw Constellations, which is the shirt that I'm wearing, which is our ongoing legacy narrative campaign, which all 3 of these armies are participating in and have participated in. We're gonna go into season 3 at the end of this year. These guys are both wearing different logos of alliances that are within those campaigns. So we have the campaign of
the Shattered Lords.
Yeah.
And it's made up of all the different Chaos players' main character, and they sit on a council called the Shattered Lords.
We met these gentlemen last year in Edmonton when we did our now 2 years running, about to be 3 years running, GameCon Canada narrative event. And they were willing to help us out as being TOs. They provided miniatures and they provided tables, and it was a lot of fun to have them out here. We did a really cool narrative tournament, and we are doing another one this year coming up in June on Father's Day weekend. That is June 14th, 15th, 16th, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at GameCon Canada in Edmonton. We are doing a 2,000 point narrative event. We're gonna play 4 games over 2 days, and we're gonna have a ton of fun having lots of shenanigans happening. It was a ton of fun last year.
oh yeah, lots of fun.
Yeah. This year, Redclaw is also hosting a paint competition at that event.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
We've had a very successful Red's Choice painting contest at the shop for years. This is Red. He is not the OG Red. The OG Red lives at the shop, but we give the Red's Choice trophy to anyone that wins a Red's Choice painting contest, and we decided we want to up the game this year. And so we're hosting the Red's Choice painting contest at GameCon this year, and we will have a panel of 3 judges. It will be myself, JP Lacrosse, and Courtney from Figuratively Painting Miniatures.
Oh, I bet her. She's great.
Yeah, so we will be the 3 judges, and then we will have the Play on Narrative Award.
We get to guest judge.
Yes, so they will get to pick their fan favorite, and everyone that's gonna win is gonna get one of these guys. We will have first, second, thirds. Any model is eligible. Can be a 3D print, can be from Conquest, can be from Warhammer, can be anime model, whatever you want. It's all good to go. The restrictions are 90 by 90 millimeter base or smaller, and make sure that we feel comfortable displaying it in our display case at the con so everyone can see it and it won't wreck the other miniatures.
How do they join?
We will have tickets available through GameCon. Tickets are $30, and they will be available on the GameCon website. And you can come in and drop off your miniature on Saturday until 1 p.m. We will judge them, and you can pick them up on Sunday at the award ceremony.
Gentlemen, a bit of an open-ended question, but what is different about building and painting and sculpting armies for more narrative play than you would say if you're going to a bunch of competitive tournaments?
For me, at least, building and painting for narrative play is the game is constantly fluctuating with rules. So when you are building with a focus on the story of the characters, when things are good or when things are bad, it helps with the story because you're not always looking for wins. There's a story in the losses, and so your characters carry a story depending on what they do. This model right here earned the name Eddie the Fluke Hawkins and Mad Jack Crocker because they were just so inconsistent in my battles. Anytime they did something good, it was a fluke. So he earned his nickname Eddie the Fluke, and that's kind of carried across the entire army.
Essentially what you're saying is the main difference is you are both modeling and picking your units and stuff like that because they have a story and not necessarily because of their role in the battlefield.
Yeah, Exactly. So many of my models were chosen because it made sense for who this army is instead of what is competitive.
Now, what if you come into a place where another person thinks that your narrative is not making sense? Do you ever come across where you have a little bit of butting heads, where it feels like you're not playing narratively enough or you are playing narratively? How do you balance that to make sure that one side isn't too strong?
Playing narratively doesn't mean picking underpowered units or building a list that doesn't work. It's just about wanting to pay attention to what happens during your game and focus on like, what are the narrative beats that I can take from this? Sometimes you'll have a character or a unit that does something really impressive and you can build on that. Or you'll have like a rival that you come up against a few times. I had one opponent where we kept going out of our way to make sure our cavalry charged each other because it happened once and was a blast, and then it just became sort of like an ongoing theme. So I would have Crumpwaza's Death Killer Trike and a whole bunch of bikes slamming into Imperial Guard cavalry every game. And like, that's the kind of sort of like emergent stuff that I think makes narrative play more interesting and makes it so that it's not just like, well, I'm taking a list that's telling a story, but like I'm also making choices with my opponent during a game that's telling a story and doing stuff that makes us have a good time.
Well, that's a really great point. So let's back up a bit and talk about, what is narrative play? What does it mean to play narratively?
For me, I think narrative play always stands out as picking a theme and running with it. Regardless of the models or the play style, I always pick one character and I build around it to write a story. I want it to be a living story that grows and continues, and I might not know how it's going to end because it depends on how my games play. So for me, very much character oriented is why we have many characters that have been customized, and I think all the armies are the same way with that one.
The way the narrative works in a lot of ways, you have a character who is your legend, who you're building your story around. So in my case, it's Gorg Bloodguts, who's taken over this orc warband after their previous planet from an old campaign that we played was devoured by Tyranids. So now they've gone off on a space hulk and come up in the Redclaw constellations. And so now he's encountering other orcs for the first time and like butting heads with them and trying to take control of the Wa.
It's choosing narrative choices in your game. It's choosing narrative choices, how you build your army and how you paint your army and stuff like that. Is that all that defines a narrative game versus a more traditionally tournament?
I would say like spirit of the game comes into it a lot.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you have like a good group of friends, you end up playing something like a bit more flavorful, a bit more fun. And I think that spirit of a narrative compared to like that match play is a big part of what makes narratives work. Because you could run into your buddy who brings, you know, like all super competitive stuff and he's like, I do have a story, but if he still plays it in a fun, friendly way, that fixes a lot of those like problems you run into with like imbalance in narratives.
You can have a very hyper-tuned list, like where you're taking all the min-maxing to get the best army, play against very more narrative-focused choices, and still work as long as the players are understanding that this isn't, I'm trying to beat face you, we're trying to tell a story together.
Players bargain, like Dan, Chaos Dan is a great example, I think, because me and Jeff mostly only play narrative. Dan actually participates a lot in local tournaments and does very well. You won the top Chaos player in the Edmonton area.
Ooh, and you're playing TAC. Ooh, hey, TAC. That's what you got to go against.
Dan is a great example because it's like, even though he's super competitive, me as a guy who doesn't know the game competitively well, I have no fears going against Dan. We both kind of come in and lay out our expectations. If I'm coming to a game and I let him know, like, hey, this is the kind of list I bring, Dan's the kind of person that can be like, okay, like he's brought that list, maybe I don't bring my list that's gonna go for like LVO or something. Then it's the same thing. It's like, if I'm a narrative player and he wants to practice for LVO, then I have to rethink my list, because it's just like the list I bring in our game will not be a competitive list. It will be a terrible list, but it's a fun list.
I love hearing all these little stories you guys have of playing each other. And this is what happens when you have a gaming group that plays regularly. If you don't have a gaming group, I'd suggest look into your local gaming store. If you're in a city that has one, they probably have one that you can join and you can find other like-minded people and play with them. And for those of you that don't have a group, you might consider starting one. You could be the change you want to see. To be honest, that's how we started playing on. Me and Tack met at a tournament. We were part of a gaming club that we met every Tuesday and we played games together. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us and coming with us today. Over the next couple days, we're playing a couple games that we're going to string together into like a narrative mini-series. We got Tack joining us with his Space Marines. I'm going to play my Custodes against the Gene Stealers.
Yeah. Craig's Worker Alliance is coming.
And then we're going to connect the game with a second game of the Space Marines versus the Black Legion as they invade this world that the Custodes and Space Marines are trying to save. Well, once again, gentlemen, thank you so much. And you can say it with me. Until we see you next time,
Play on!